I think we started by, by a bit of history how I started my career. So I've been in policy for a very long time, both locally and one of the things for which I'm grateful is many of the measures we put in place, sinking fund, Exim Bank, infrastructure fund. Infrastructure fund is what transformed Dubai in 30 years.
Okay.
Proud to that, and even until I was in graduate school, talk was always about petrodollar. A lot of dollars moving from oil revenue, Middle East to go to New York, to go to all those things, until they had the presence of mind to bring the dollar home to develop. So you had Dubai, China did something similar, Brazil used its oil revenue, and that's how they became middle-income countries. The other example is the Eastern European countries, like Croatia, Lithuania. Today they come here and they say they will give us loan and other things. But to join the EU, you had to put some of these mechanisms in place, and that makes you a worthwhile middle income. So many of those things were from, that exposure which I had when I did missions, as a member of the, a staff of the IMF. So I was bringing to bear, in a political economic context, measures which, particularly since we were having oil, which is a new resource, right, we needed to do certain things. And now it's been shown that some of these things. I don't think, having been around policy for a long time, and I told you even from my career, I work with politicians, Dr. Botri and others, I know about the vilification of politicians. Right.
So you expected, you anticipated it to a certain extent?
Well, let me put it this way, with all humility. It's not everybody who is even educated or even had the opportunity to work outside who would have worked within context of, say, the World Bank, the IMF, and others, as I did, to see some of the things, the exposure that I do. So my responsibility is to try and explain, which is what I try to do as much as possible. But the situation was tough, especially when crude oil prices fell, because when crude oil prices were even average, we attempted to after we went to Parliament to amend the PRMA so that we could bring the oil prices down from $99, which we used to prepare under the formula, to $56, I remember, per barrel. We couldn't get it. It was $40 or something. So the economy took a big hit. Okay. But if I am going to excuse lay NDC or even MPP for not understanding some of what I'm saying, I don't think those who should have known, who were giving them the impression that things could be simplified, right? You mentioned free SHS. I still maintain that it's not fiscally sustainable, because look at what is being thrown at free SHS. Okay. Right? First, capping. So all the statutory funds were capped. Get fund, DSAF, which the Supreme Court just said was, luckily that's in the Constitution, so just nullified. IGFs and whatever. They were capped, thrown into free SHS. It means free SHS is not free. It has a cost. It has a cost to rural development, and the assemblies were suffering. It has a cost to, the providers not being paid because the NHIL was capped. And that's the reason input VAT has been blocked to bring in more revenue, to pay them. So it has a cost. Secondly, even PIAC raised the issue that even within the education sector, they were not conforming to the PRMA by using 70% of the ABFA to go into even education infrastructure. Okay. It was going to recurrent expenditure. And I'm looking at the numbers, but speculation is that almost 80% of ABFA is going into free SHS, so it's not without cost. Okay. Infrastructure is suffering. Remember the attempts to say that Heritage Fund was bringing low revenues, let's use it to invest into education, just an alias for throwing everything. So if you look at all of these, which is going into free SHS, right? I believe that the minister himself fell short when he said, for those whose sons are in Achimota and the rest, and they can pay. Right? I'm not quoting him, I'm just paraphrasing.
Yeah.
They should be allowed to pay, and he was roasted.
Yes.
Right? He's the one looking at the numbers. And so he's the one telling us that, in essence, it's not sustainable. The path is not sustainable. And let me give you another example. If you look at the provision for arrears, the government just went for supplementary budget.
Yes.
The government said it needed money to pay energy sector debt. I just showed that it shouldn't have happened.
Okay.
Schools are reopening September. The third year is coming in September. Where in the, apart from saying we introduced free SHS and it's working, where in the supplementary budget were we giving numbers? Where in the supplementary budget were we? Because remember, it is September is in 2019 fiscal year. And so the first semester is going to be 2019 fiscal year. The 2020 budget is going to deal with second semester going. So where in the budget have we been given any analysis at all about what it will take to take on the additional, where's the infrastructure expansion? Because this is the first time all three streams are going to be. So you're going to have, all 3 years going. Right. Minority tried to get information. We didn't. Right. And nobody can convince me that and I call it the small amount, 858 million. And remember, it was not adjusted.
Yeah.
The supplementary budget, that's another question we are going to ask, because they did a supplementary budget and said there were energy sector arrears for which they needed more money. If there were arrears, why were the arrears in the budget not adjusted? It was left, the same. How come the adjustment was made amortization? Have you borrowed already? Because amortization means that you are paying debt. Right? You see, but it wasn't adjusted. And if it was not adjusted, I don't think anybody, any layman, any headmistress, any whatever headmaster, whatever school administrator can say confidently that any school feeding provider, whatever, all those who are, I don't think any of them can say that they do not have arrears which has not been paid. And I hope that we can pay, use the 858 to pay. Remember, the president said pensions were owing, right? He said it at the May Day. I can list contractors said they are owed. You remember I was in this studio and saying that offsets were taking place, not payments and all that. So all of this, if you add it, there's 858 or something represent all the arrears in the system. In particular, you're asking for, for which you can argue that maybe the extra levies, but it take time for the additional extra levies to come in to pay. But if it's going to come in as revenue, it's going to come in as tax revenue, which is going to pay arrears. So you should show the arrears in the supplementary.
This is not the first time you are raising issues with the kind of things that are even reported in the budget. You said you try to be as detailed as possible about inflows from all sectors. How much in terms of arrears that you are going to pay?
And this is the figures which we were just, the ESLA figures. The average is about 3. It started with 3.2 billion. In fact, under the program, for the period to 2018, from 2016, ESLA was supposed to bring in 10.3 billion. ESLA brought in 9.6 billion. Almost 10 billion, or almost the 10 billion was brought.
Okay.
Right? If we owe 13 billion,
we should be able to pay that off.
It will be left with 3 billion, which next year's projection shows can be used to pay off, because next year is projected to increase to 3.5 billion. Right? Now the government's own projection is that up to 2025 or something which they projected, ESLA is even going to go up to about 5 billion per annum. And so my conservative calculation is that during that period, about 29 billion, close to 30 billion will come in. not even up to the 10 years.
So
this is the point.
So a couple of things. As we speak now, we should have made significant effort in paying off the energy sector debts. We should have made
I can say with certainty that
it would have
our
been paid.
part would have been paid.
It would have been paid if you were a minister.
I can say that